Hello, everyone. I'm very pleased to welcome you to today's event, The Power of Women's Votes, How Voices Matter Up and Down the Ballot. My name is Marissa Greason, Barnard class of 1981, and I'm honored to be the Project Continuum Committee Chair for the Alumni Association of Barnard College. Before we start, a few housekeeping issues. As a reminder, this event will be recorded and the recording will be made available to all registrants. Attendees will not have microphone or camera access during this online event. Attendee voices, likenesses, and/or images will not be captured by Barnard College. Written submission of questions may be shared during the Q&A portion of this event. I am delighted to introduce our two fabulous speakers for this event, Lala Wu, class of 2007, and Liz Abzug. Lala is a co-founder and the executive director of Sister District, a grassroots organization that builds power in state legislatures by winning urgent elections each year and building democratic infrastructure for the long term. Prior to Sister District, Lala practiced law, specializing in environmental issues and clean energy. Liz is the founder and executive director of the Lala Abzug Leadership Institute, a nonprofit leadership and debate training institute for underserved girls, women, and gender-expansive youth of color. She was an adjunct professor in urban studies at Barnard College for 19 years, and Lala was one of her star students. So this should be fabulous today. While at Barnard, she co-developed a course with Professor Rosalind Rosenberg and was the only professor to teach the new course called Women in Leadership. Liz taught the course for 5 years, which was the foundational and only academic course offered at the time when the Athena Center was established. Liz is a national public affairs and strategic consultant, professor, lawyer, and renowned public speaker who has spoken at colleges, universities, conferences, and conventions on topics including civil and human rights, women's leadership, women in politics, youth employment, and economic development. Thank you both for joining us today, and I will hand this over to Liz.
Thank you, Marissa, for that great introduction of both of us. That was wonderful. Thank you very much. All right, here we are all together, and we hope that you're going to get some inspiration out of what we share. And I'd like to go right into it. And I'm going to be asking Lala some questions. She's the star here, so right into it. Let's go. Can you tell us, Lala, about your journey since Barnard and what inspired you to co-found Sister District?
Thank you, Liz. It's so great to be here with you and with Marissa and this wonderful Barnard community. I'm really thrilled to have a chance to do this. It's quite amazing to think how far I've come. And whenever I see the 07 next to my name, I think that it was not that long ago, but it actually was quite some time ago. So we've come a long way. At Barnard, I was an urban studies major with a specialization in political science. And as mentioned, I was in, I don't know about the star student part, but I was in Liz's class. I actually have a hard time calling her Liz as opposed to Professor Abzug, but I'm working on it. And Liz taught an amazing seminar where I learned not only a tremendous amount about cities and how to think about them and the social services and just this building the physical infrastructure and all the policies that go into the fabric of our everyday lives. But I also made some lifelong friends, and I'm sure that many of you on this call feel the same way. I actually just celebrated Rosh Hashanah with one of the friends that I met with in your class. And so, Shana Tova to those to celebrate.
That's great.
And here I am, and after college, I worked for a year in social entrepreneurship. And then I went to Berkeley Law School, where I knew I wanted to study environmental law. I spent some time in Colorado and in Boston. I clerked for a couple federal judges before I settled back in San Francisco. And I was at a big law firm, Morrison & Foerster, doing clean energy law for them, helping clean energy clients get their projects built. Then 2016 happens. And I mean, if I can just take all of you back to that dark moment in 2016 when we thought we were going to watch the election of the first female president, but Instead, we were watching the election of a celebrity lunatic, and I don't care if you're blue or red or whatever it is, but I think that all of us, having went to women's college or being part of that community, we're so excited about what this moment could have been. And then it was just so crushing and devastating to see what it ended up being. So, I was with my friends, in the chilly back patio of a bar in San Francisco. I don't know what we did, but we cried, we hugged each other, we somehow made it home, woke up the next day, and we're like, okay, well, what do we do? And the problem that we kept asking ourselves, and that came up over and over, was that, well, we live in San Francisco, we live in the Bay Area, it's so rich in resources and time, energy, money. How is it that we have no idea how we're supposed to make a difference? And we can call Nancy Pelosi, but what is she going to do? She's already agrees with us. So I happened to meet at that time 4 other women, mostly lawyers, but actually mostly strangers. We met on Facebook and we connected around this idea of channeling resources where they are to where they might be most needed and strategic. And for us, it became so clear so quickly that there was a huge gap in the state legislative space, in the space of state legislatures. So that's what we've been doing ever since. We've got over 70,000 volunteers all across the country, organized into local teams or chapters that are then sistered, like a sister cities concept, with state legislative candidates running in close, winnable districts in key battleground states for support. So this year we're in Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, North Carolina, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, these kinds of states. And so, my home team in San Francisco, for example, is paired up with candidates in Arizona and Nevada, and they're raising money, making phone calls, writing postcards, traveling, knocking on doors, all to help get these candidates across the finish line. So obviously it's a very, very busy year, and it's amazing to think back to where this all started.
That's great. And I think all the gals on the call can appreciate all the years. I mean, when you graduated up to the present, all the experience that you have had before you've gotten into this passion of co-running sister district. So tell us, why are the state legislatures so critical to our democracy, and especially in today's political climate? In other words, and why is it important to have more women in state legislatures?
Yeah. State legislatures, well, at Sister District, we are obsessed with state legislatures, and we always have been, and we always will be, for a few reasons. First is the outsized impact that state legislatures have on policy. This is exceedingly clear after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, but it's always been true. And actually, it's part of a kind of broad conservative effort to move more and more power from the federal government to the state governments. And so it's really important that those of us who care about women's rights, who care about gun safety, who care about the climate, who care about education, are aware of this trend and are focused on the states, because this is where so much of the policy that actually impacts people's lives gets made. Another reason is because of gerrymandering. In most states, the state legislatures are the ones that control redistricting, and therefore the extent of gerrymandering and whether or not we live in a truly free, a fair and representative democracy. And of course, gerrymandering is the phenomenon where politicians draw the districts in ways that pack and crack voters, and so that they can favor themselves. And it ends up being this topsy-turvy situation where voters or politicians are choosing their voters, and voters are not choosing their politicians. And so state legislatures are a linchpin of power for making sure that redistricting is fair. Another reason the state legislatures are so important is because they are the leadership pipeline for tomorrow's national and federal leaders. Look, so many leaders have come up through state legislatures. Almost half of our past presidents were state legislators in the past, including Obama. And it's important that folks, they learn how to govern as well as how to win, how to build coalitions. And that can happen at the state legislative level. And finally, we love state legislatures, and they're so important because they are able to have this really outsized impact. trust. They are a way that ordinary people can get involved. Of course, if you've got a lot of money, you can get involved in all kinds of races, and you can get access to senators and presidents and so on and so forth. But if you just have $20 or $200 or 20 hours or 200 hours, and you want to really make a difference, the biggest bang for your buck is at the state legislative level because of all of the political implications and power building that you can see at this level, but also the relatively small size and how they still, this level of the ballot still flies under the radar. It's really for the fraction of the cost of a congressional race, you can help to elect some really, really incredible people. So, you know, and why women? Well, Sister District, we support both men and women in our organization and everything in between in terms of our candidates. But we have ended up supporting something like 80% women candidates. And it's because we're looking for the best candidates to do the job. And it just so happens that oftentimes that involves women. And we do take an intentional, well, our first cut is on strategy. We are looking for close, winnable seats where we can flip chambers to get majorities, or we can hold majorities, or we can make inroads into badly gerrymandered states. Diversity of racial, gender, all of it, LGBTQ is very, very important to us. And so we take that cut too. And the reason for that is not diversity for diversity's sake, but it's because women really bring unique perspectives and experiences that enrich policymaking, that help us make better policy, not just for women, but and not even just for families, but for all of us. I'll give you one example. There's only one state in the country that has gender parity, that has more women than men in its state legislature, and that is Nevada. We are working, and we recently received a grant from Melinda Gates' foundation to really help to increase the number of women in state legislatures, because we know that what can happen in Nevada can happen elsewhere. In Nevada, with a women majority legislature, we got comprehensive family leave policies to support working families, allowing parents to take time off, for birth, adoption, for a child without fear of losing their job. This is something that we are clearly struggling very hard with at the federal level, not really able to achieve, at least not yet. And we are able to get this in a state where we have a majority women legislature, and I don't think that's a coincidence. There's also reproductive rights legislation. They've been able to pass gender-based violence legislation, economic equality and pay equity that they are working on, education and childcare initiatives. So the list really goes on, and it's just to say that increasing women's representation is not just about fairness, which we all love, and fairness is important, but it's really about effective governance.
I think you guys got a crash course on the power of state legislature on so many levels. So thank you, Lala. I got the next question related to that is, what are the most pressing women's rights issues, what you think are the most pressing women's rights issues on the ballot this year? And can we mobilize votes to take action?
Yeah. I mean, obviously abortion is at the top of this list, right? After the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, the country, especially women, were just shocked, just completely flabbergasted that something like this could happen in this country. Fortunately or unfortunately, here at Sister District, we could see the writing on the wall. We knew it was coming, and it made us want to just double down on making sure that there were strong women and allies in these legislatures, that we had as many majorities as possible so that we could actually pass laws to expand access to reproductive rights and freedoms and abortion in places if the federal government wasn't going to protect that for us. And so this is really where we see so much engagement and activism and excitement is around abortion. But of course, the economy is really on everybody's minds this year as well. Even though, inflation has cooled, the prices aren't going to go down. That's the nature of inflation. And there's a lot of people who are still there's a lot of families, a lot of women, a lot of folks out there who are really still struggling. And so making sure that we connect on those kitchen table issues is also really, really critical. And I would argue again that women, because they often make the spending decisions in the family, they're the ones who are going to the grocery store. They're the ones who are keeping track of these costs and thinking about how to get all of their kids clothed and fed and out the door. This is something that is really, really important to them as well. So these are just two of the many mobilizing issues. I mean, guns, climate, all of these things, they matter so much. And unfortunately, fortunately, in some cases, but they touch so many people. And so it is all about when our volunteers are on the doors, when our candidates are on the doors, it's about connecting with folks, reaching out to them, and making sure that we message to them what our shared values are, and so that they can make informed decisions.
Okay, it's great. And also related, like you referenced it, with women's rights increasingly under attack, how do you see the role of women voters in shaping the upcoming election?
Yeah. Well, I want to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about some really interesting research that Sister District has done on down ballot roll-off. And so this sounds very wonky, but bear with me for a second. This is basically where there are voters who start at the top of the ticket, and then they vote all the way down. And actually, it tends to be folks on the right who do that very, very consistently and obediently and loyally. They start at the top and they vote all the way down. Unfortunately, those of us and folks on the left, progressive, liberal, et cetera, we did a big survey, and we've also observed in our research that though from looking at voting histories, that folks on the left, they start at the top, but they stop voting before they get to the bottom of the ballot. So every year there are hundreds of thousands, millions of people who are voting for the top of the ticket, but they're not voting all the way down. And so you might ask, well, why does this matter? It matters because the margins at state, legislative, and local levels are incredibly tiny. I'll just give you an example that in North Carolina, there was a Democrat who became a Republican last year, and this gave the Republicans the supermajorities that they needed to override the Democratic governor's veto and ban abortion. It's incredibly tragic, but the most tragic thing about it is that if we could have changed this outcome, prevented it, if we had just won one more seat and that seat that we lost was lost by 354 votes. 354 votes, and the outcome could have been different for millions of people. And, there's also great examples. In Pennsylvania, Sister District, we supported a candidate in 2022 whose single victory helped to flip the Pennsylvania State House for the first time since 2010, which was important because it enabled blocking a constitutional amendment that would have banned abortion. And her seat was won by just 63 votes. 63 votes. So, it's really, really wild to see, to think about the implications. In fact, we found that if we had convinced less than 2% of voters who had voted for Biden in 2020, but did not vote for their state legislative candidate, if we've convinced less than 2% of those people to vote all the way down the ticket, we could have flipped 14 more chambers in 9 states. Think about how many more women would be in office, how many more women-friendly policies, and just policies that benefit all of us, right? And so this is the little, thank you for letting me get on my soapbox with this question. This is down ballot roll-off is very, very nerdy, but it's just a huge opportunity. It's kind of a hidden turnout problem. You can think of it that way, because it's not just those on the left, it's women, young people, and people of color who we found are all rolling off the ballot more than their counterparts. And so it's very, very important that as women, we not only vote this year and every year, but we vote all the way down the ticket.
That answers the question very clearly, I think. I do. And everything that you do is passionate and true in my view. So thank you for that. I think I was waved on to one of the moderators to move it to you.
Okay, awesome. Well, we are going to do something a little bit different. I was the star of the show, perhaps for the first half, but now we're going to flip the script a little bit. I'm really, really excited to have the opportunity to ask Liz a few questions about her amazing background and story, and all of the incredible work that I have looked up to, and continue to admire. So, Liz, your mother, the amazing, path-breaking, pioneering Bella Abzug, she was such a trailblazer in politics and women's rights. So what was it like to grow up with such an iconic leader, and how has her legacy shaped your own career and activism?
Thank you. It's always a very important question. When anybody grows up with a very powerful mother or father, but in this case, mother, who is really dedicated and committed. She was a civil rights lawyer well before she was in politics. She didn't get elected to the Congress until she was 50 years old. So she believed that she should raise her family, you know, and have in concept. But all through when I was a little kid, I mean, she was fighting for civil rights causes, and she was fighting for school integration back then, and having a very active civil rights labor law practice. And her expectations of her children, myself, my sister, as many of us on this call, I know that from being a Barnard professor and Barnard girls, a very high expectation level, but also because she was under so much tension, you know, to get, you know, to Congress, to get, you know, a case litigated. And, you know, also she loved my father, and she needed time, you know, to be with us together as a family and to be with my dad. So it was not always easy sharing her, and more difficult sharing her with the world, because gals on the call, I've talked to other famous, you know, kids, I mean, who've had famous parents, and it's all the same kind of dilemma, but it's a dilemma of all of us who have very motivated mothers in particular. It's not always easy, because in the 7 years that I was that I was in college and law school, she was either in office or running for a political office all those 7 years. So the exposure the expectation level I was getting just from that alone, you know, being Bella's daughter, and she was being heavily covered in the press because she was rather unique, as you know, put a lot of pressure on me. I'm not going to deny it. And it always was not easy.
Yeah, no, I can definitely, that really, I find it quite moving. I have a 3-year-old, and I have no aspirations to be famous. But you know, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I think it's kind of like the side of things that people oftentimes don't talk about, right? I think it's always like, oh, it must have been so inspiring and so wonderful, but actually it's important to remember, especially for women, it has a cost, right?
Absolutely. You know, she just on the last one on this one, she consciously waited until she was 50, because at that time she figured to run for Congress, because, you know, she figured she was there present as a mother. But in my mother's case, because she was so driven and passionate and committed to the social change things she was working on, civil rights cases, labor law, she really, and integration of schools back in the 50s and 60s, etc. She really wasn't that present. She was there for all the important things, you know what I mean? Yeah. Talent shows, when I'm, you know, doing great baseball, volleyball games and things like that. She never missed any of that. But, you know, I had to share it with the world as she got more famous, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that.
I survived.
Say you're thriving, and in fact, to honor her legacy, you founded the Bella Abzug Leadership Institute to empower women. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about what inspired you to start this initiative and what its impact has been over the years.
Okay, I have always believed in my work, and my mother, who broke down the barriers for all of you women on the call. I wanted to make a living legacy to her work, and to bring it to this generation, to you guys, and to the next generation, the ways in which she was effective by having the amazing ability to speak, to write, to engage people, to activate, inspire people. And I'm, at my own work, as a professor and lawyer and activist, and an activist, I wanted to bring those skills to this generation of women, and girls, so that you guys can grab what I have told, and Lala's heard me probably say this if you remember, grab the mantle of leadership. Because we have not achieved as much as we've achieved. We still have a long way to go. And now, because of the politics of Mr. Trump and the Republican Congress, there's been regression. And we have to, and certainly the Supreme Court overturning 50 years of constitutional law with the right to abortion and reproductive rights. Now we have enormous need for women and girls to stand up, and boys and feminist boys and young men, to stand up and really know what they're doing as leaders, and to care about it, and to not sacrifice your principles, and to really have the techniques and the dynamic ability to motivate your friends, your family, your communities. And that's what Bali tries to do. And I wanted to focus it on young women of color, low-income women, immigrant young women, and also there are young women in there who could pay for this program, who come from, middle income and higher income. I throw a few of them in there. And the reason is making it free for everybody, because, if you were to pay for a program like this at, let's say, Columbia, they run a debate program, or any university in the country, you'd be paying $6,000. Everything we offer to our students is for free, including lunch and breakfast during the summer program. But I urge you young women on this call, the call is out there. I mean, Lala tell you the importance of why, we need to elect more women in the down ballot in the state legislatures. And it really is true. But at the same time, we also need to elevate the power of women to the Congress and to the White House. Hopefully we are about to do that. And I want to bring what I know to this generation and the next, to figure out the way to do that. And in all sectors, not in just politics, and corporate, public, private, academia, and in the sciences. We train our kids, and we bring in role models to speak, women who are, very accomplished, to give them the pathway, show them that there is a pathway to succeed to the top level of what their dreams may be.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, I think that what you're describing is there's so many intangibles to leadership, but actually it's possible to break them down and to teach them. And, especially for folks who don't have as much privilege, you're really providing that kind of access. And so, I know there's some young folks on this call, but also lots of alumni. So you heard her, if you got nieces or daughters or anything like that, send them over to Bobby.
Absolutely. So really, we would love to have you. Your kids, grandkids, sisters, etc.
So I also wanted to ask you, you've had such deep involvement in leadership development and activism. And so what if there's one or two things where you think that what women can do to better mobilize and advocate for their rights, maybe particularly at the down ballot level?
Yeah. Let me just share this, Lala, and to the rest of you on this call to answer that. 50 years ago, Lala Abzug introduced a national daycare bill, 50 years ago. And here we are, 50 years later, trying to do the same thing. Family leave, national daycare. 50 years ago, ladies on this call, and I used to tell my students when I taught up at Barnard, if you were a single woman or divorced, you could not get a credit card in your own name or a mortgage. 50 years ago, I know that may be short to some of you or long to some of you, but just imagine when I was growing up, there in high school, college, we couldn't get credit cards in our own names. We weren't married at that point, or some were divorced, and we needed mortgages. You couldn't get in your name. Bella introduced the act that broke that down and made that illegal. Now, the Fair Consumer Credit Act. So why is it important for women, as you said before, Lala, to bring to the perspective, to the table, not one seat, but to have half the seats at the table, to make sure that we are representing what we need in this world and in this country, And certainly state reps have to do that. But also I'm a big believer, as you well know, in Congress, the two higher houses, Congress and Senate, House and Senate, and of course the presidency. And it's frustrating. Okay, I'm older. I realize I'm a lot older than all of you on this call. I get it. But the truth is, I'm tired of it. And you guys should be too. Because your predecessors, the women like my mother and others who we stand on the shoulders of, they fought, and going back to the suffragettes, of course, if any of you have been seeing the suffragettes on Broadway, but nevertheless, they fought like hell and they lost their lives, and many of them sacrificed so much. And I'm talking the second wave of feminism in the 70s and bring it forth to the third wave. And we have not achieved enough yet.
Not at all. Not even close.
And so I am calling out to you gals. I am calling out to you guys, and we need more voices like Lala who are doing the action, not just talking about the words, but taking the action to change, for social change. And it goes across the board in every way in terms of you guys, as I used to tell Lala and the students I've had there, you have enormous complex problems, and we all have, right? But you're inheriting them. Unfortunately, my generation and others behind us screwed up, all right? But you are inheriting. We, older generation, want to work to help you with the techniques, but we can't speak for you. And we can't strategize for you. You have to strategize yourselves to figure this out, to unwind what is a real, in many ways, climate change. I can list it across the board that you got to figure out. And also equal pay. You girls are born, right? But there are girls who are immigrants, who are going to community college, who are not in access to any kind of privileged situation. Not to say that, at Barnard, there are low-income students, but the point is that they have to fight so hard for everything. Some of my students, trainees in Bali, one of them comes up to me and she says, Liz, I want to go to Mount Holyoke. She's a Pakistani young woman, but I can't go there because my father won't let me take out a loan, because in the Muslim tradition, they don't allow it. What about the other girl who comes to me, one of our trainees, and said, I have moved around so much with my family, there are rats in every apartment we've been in. Another one, my mother has gotten hit by her boyfriend. I witnessed it. What do I do, Liz, to try to report him or stop it? What can I do? She says, this 14-year-old girl, right? Now, why do I share that? Because that's what I'm talking about. Those are the individual stories, but the systemic stories of what we can all work on to try to change.
Absolutely. Those examples are so powerful, and thank you for sharing them. I think that we have to find ways to, like you said, elevate folks at all different levels and at all different parts of our society. And, we're here talking about elections and politics tonight in particular, but it's important along all of these dimensions, and it's all connected. So, looking ahead a bit, how do you see the role of women evolving in politics and leadership, and what progress or setbacks, if you could, use a crystal ball, or progress or setbacks do you think we're going to see in the next decade?
Well, right now we've seen them.
Yeah.
Right now, as you well know, with the, overturning Roe v. Wade, whenever, ladies on the call, whenever there is a group in power and rights start to be gained, whether it was in the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement, the environmental rights movement, the gun rights movement, the prevailing power, and it's mostly been white men, push back and push you back, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. And what do I want? What do we need? We need total gender equity, gender equality at the tables of power. And I don't mean just politics. I mean in the corporate structures. I mean in academia. I mean that a woman who is a director of a medical department in major hospitals should be making 15%, 20% less than their male counterpart because they're a woman, and yet the education they got is the same as their male counterpart, and that is going on a lot. My partner, who became a partner in a major law firm because she's so smart, at 30, when she became a partner, there were 2 women in her partners in her firm, which was a substantial labor rights, civil rights, real estate development. They did it all, right? And I worked for a government I worked for a governor and a president. Governor Cuomo, the first one. And when I used to be in meetings in a very important place, the Urban Development Corporation, talking about development in New York City, there were 3 women out of about 17 men sitting at this big table. Do you know what happened in the 90s and the early 2000s? I opened up my mouth to make a point, and the CEO of a public benefit, this is for the state of New York, the Urban Development Corporation, tells me, that's enough. Stop talking. So, I mean, you know, a person who's not as aggressive or as out there as me, you know, would shrink in their chair. And as far as I was concerned, I'm a senior manager in this corporation, and yet I was so floored. What am I going to do? How am I going to handle it? Well, we should be at a point where we have none of that. And it's not pulling one chair up to the table. It's not just leaning in, God bless Cheryl, what is it? Steinberg. But it is all half quota. You know, in other countries in the world, they have done that. In even years back in Rwanda, where they had a terrible civil war, it turns out that they were one of the countries internationally that had the majority of women in their legislature, because you know why? The men there who were warring, and it was a terrible internal war, said, you know, maybe we screwed this up. And we have these women who are leaders at the local level, and we want to put them into the parliament. So what is the push? What is the problem? The more we gain power, the more we gain representation in the state houses, in the Congress, and then hopefully the White House, there is pushback. And I don't mean just from, excuse me if anybody supports Trump on this call, but I don't mean just from the conservatives out there. I mean from many men who are threatened, and women too, but mostly all men, threatened by the power that women are trying to rightfully take. Why is it that in this year, 2024, we, I tell my students at Bali, women are not in the United States Constitution 200 years after our country's founding. I mean, that's insane. That's insane. That should not be.
I know, and the fight for the Equal Rights Amendment continues, you know, and that's something that we thought we were going to, that seemed on the horizon decades.
That's correct.
I mean, you know, it reminds me, I took my 3-year-old, she was at that time just 8 months old, but I took her to her first protest in, you know, a couple years ago, right after the Dobbs decision was released. And it was a Bands Off Our Bodies protest. And look, I was so pissed that I had to be there, but I was also proud to be there with her. And it was ended up being like a really like powerful, moving thing to be there with a lot of our sister district San Francisco volunteers. We were like walking hand in hand. And then we get to the end, and I don't know if any of you are in or know San Francisco, but we go up Market Street and end at the Ferry Building. It's a gorgeous day. And then I saw a sign that just stopped me in my tracks. And it said, I marched with my mother. I never imagined I'd have to march with my daughter.
That's a great sign. That's a great one.
And you know, and I think it reflects a lot of what you're talking about, which is like, as we look ahead, we also have this weird sensation where it feels like we're also looking behind us. And you know, it's just, I
don't want you guys and you and the young women on this call to have to really go back and have to have your daughters or your kids or, you know, younger brothers and sisters have to go back. And yet we are facing it right now. We are. And so therefore, that's why there needs to be this aggressive, there needs to be smart gals like you, there needs to be prepared leaders who are going to take action, not just take the words, mobilize at the local level, at the community level, at the state legislative level, at the national level, you know, and take action. You know, one thing that why Bella was, and Obama and Hillary, but what I teach leadership, one of the things about them all is that they each, and my mother, I can tell you this, 150%, had principles they never compromised on. There were some bottom line principles. Obama had it, Hillary's had it, and my mother sure as hell had it, okay? and I believe I have it. And those kinds of principles that really do fight social injustice are things that we have to stand by. And sometimes you have to sacrifice for it. You know what I mean? Sometimes you have to move over, and let other people in on the power and support them in doing it and getting it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I just thank you so much. It's so much fun to be in conversation with you after all these years. I mean, we've seen each other. It's a true delight to be here in front of this group of alumni and students, and to be able to have this conversation with you. So I think we are turning to Q&A now, if that's correct.
Yep, you are correct. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Lala. We have questions from the audience. Let's see. All right. I believe this is for both of you. What advice would you give to people who want to get involved but feel disconnected or overwhelmed by politics?
Sure. Yes, I'm happy to start. I'm a little biased, but I think the Sister District provides an awesome on-ramp for people. There are chapters all across the country, particularly in deeply blue places like San Francisco and New York and LA and all of that. And it's really great because you get to meet a group of like-minded folks who have a really clear sense of purpose. And there's a really good match of the tactics to the strategy to what are we doing here? What are the big goals? But, it's not just Sister District. There's so many organizations out there, so many groups where you can just plug in and start to build some community with folks. Because what we found at Sister District is people come because they're pissed about Trump, or they're angry about abortion, or they've just had it with all of this gun violence, or this, that, or the other thing. But they stay because they've made connections, they've made friends, because as many of our volunteers like to say, it's cheaper than therapy.
Yeah, right, for sure. Let me just say on that one, girls on the call, and I tell this to some of my younger women friends who are in their 20s and 30s, younger, and I say they are friends because they are, like my cat sitter. Think about the thing, along with what Lala said, not only her organization, others, but think about the thing that gets you impassioned or angry, the thing in your life that is an issue, all right? And just think, what moves you what moves you, what's bothering you, what's something you're really, see as being positive, and that issue, and take that and say, okay, that's when I get, like you said, that's what I need to get involved with. You can't afford to be turned off and to politics, because truth is, politics, big P, little p, and intermediate P are in everything we do, every part of your lives. And so to get involved is to think about, what is it that really makes you want to change something, or angry or happy in the political or in the social structure, and then go and try to help, secure it or change it. That's it.
Okay. All right. Can you give us another question here? Can you give us some effective ways to educate our friends about the toxic effect of disinformation regarding Democrats now in power? For an example, when our flood-suffering friends complain that the government is only giving us $750 and we lost everything, we should say,
what a question. And a very big one that deserves its own, hour-long plus discussion. There's some general principles to think about. And the first is, at least if you're on social media, don't proactively repeat what the lie is. Don't do that. Always say affirmatively what is true. Try not to, unless you have to, repeat what the misinformation is. If you are in a conversation with somebody, of course, that's a different story. I mean, first, just be a human, which I'm sure you're doing. It's so horrible, the images coming out of North Carolina, what's happened there, and another storm coming through. And it's really just so incredibly tragic that this disinformation is piled on top of this, like just creating more misery and preventing people from getting the aid that they could need and could get. So, I mean, Oh, yes. No, I see your Q&A. Thank you. No, I'm sure it's very hard. I mean, I think that the general principles here again are, you express your empathy. I'm so sorry for what you've been through. And then you try to appeal to our shared values, right? Like we all believe that government should work for us. And if we want government to work even better, then not right now, but there's ways that folks can get involved. And that's why I care so deeply. And I believe that the Democrats or whoever are the ones that are providing the most aid. And I think again, appealing to the local level, all the reports I've heard on this are that state and local folks in North Carolina are very happy with the support that the federal government has given. And so maybe if there's some local voices, some local surrogates that you could point to, but it's a really tough, heartbreaking situation all around.
Yep. Liz, anything to add?
Only that it's a propaganda kind of thing, as Lala just sort of indicated, and that even Kamala, for instance, I just heard her ask last night on a couple of interviews, what are you not, is the government not putting resources in these, states that have really suffered? Is it not? Tell us whether the government is or not. FEMA, the amount of money that's being put down, the amount of people that are being sent in. It's really about the facts. Disinformation is in many different ways. You know it, we know it, all over not only social media, but you have a conversation with somebody. And so it's really about the facts. It's really about knowing, looking, what is FEMA giving? What is the local, police force doing? Local agencies putting in there. And then you have to dispute that this disinformation isn't true. And that's why what Kamala, is having to do and wasting a lot of time because of the crap that they're loading down on her, on this, her and Biden on this, to be defensive about what they have been doing, It's a shame because people's lives are in the balance here at the local level and are suffering. And there's going to be more. We see, not only this storm coming in, but there will be more and more and more with climate change.
Right. Okay, thank you. Lala, we have a question for you. What are your hopes for the future of women in state legislatures, and what would progress look like to you?
Well, when I think about like where we're trying to go eventually, the thing that Sister District is known for working on right now is getting women elected, right? Getting women elected to these state legislatures so that we can have governing majorities and get all the stuff that we want to get done. But it's not enough in our view to just get women elected. We also want to see women taking on leadership roles. We want them, because these leadership roles, as Liz well knows, are really critical for setting the agenda, for determining what kinds of bills make it to the next stage, for setting the narrative for whose voices are going to be promoted in the process. So this leadership piece is critically important. And I would point you in terms of a place where this has been really successful to Michigan, where we have seen the top of the ticket, these incredible women. I mean, if you live in Michigan, I'm a bit jealous. Have Gretchen Whitmer as your governor, to have these incredible, the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, all women, and the head of the Senate is Winnie Brinks, who is a sister alum. Right. There's all of these incredible women who, and Mallory McMorrow, you might have seen her incredible, if you haven't, look it up. Mallory McMorrow, she did a floor speech countering an attack her opponent levied upon her, accusing her of being a groomer and a sexual abuser. I mean, it's just so gross. This horrible, unbelievable stuff. She made a really powerful speech, and now she is, this rising star, not only in Michigan, but across the country. And so this is what we need to see, is not just women being elected, but also women in leadership. And then what we can do with all of that is change the structures, right? We can change the structures, the structural barriers that so many women face to even deciding to run for office, right? There is, of course, this broader cultural milieu, like this idea that, oh, that's not me, right? Like I'm not meant to do that. And Bali's work is helping to kind of change people's minds about that. But then there's also, it's okay, I decided that I am going to run for office. Where do I get support? Well, there's great organizations like Emerge and Emily's List that help with training. That's wonderful. But more is needed there. And then once you're in office, you are more likely to face harassment and threats, and the kind of the number of stories I've heard from my lawmaker women friends who have said that they entered the room on their first day of work, or even worse, like many days into session, and to have the male lawmaker assume that they were like an aide, or an intern, or somebody who was not their peer. It's just unbelievable. Someone asked my friend Delegate Irene Shin, Virginia delegate, on the first day, he goes, oh, so who do you work for? And she was like flabbergasted. She goes, I work for the people of Virginia. She's like, this is my answer. This is what I do. And there's a lot of structures that need to change. State legislatures are not paid very well. Some cases it's not paid at all. So we need to change the pay. We need to make remote voting possible. We need to have childcare policies, lots of things. And so anyway, the goal is equal power. That's the vision, right? Is actually having an equitable playing field for folks to have their voices heard.
Excellent. Okay. All right. Liz, do you want to add anything? I have a question for you as well.
Give me the question. I can't add to that. I agree with her 150%. She eloquently put it out there.
Okay. Okay. So your question, what are the most critical issues for women's rights that need to be addressed right now? And how can we ensure that women's voices are at the forefront of those conversations?
Yeah, well, I think everybody on this call probably is very aware of that. I think, choice, right to abortion, reproductive rights, right up on the top. In fact, I told my friends, political, consultants and others about 1.5 years ago that I believe this is when Biden was still the nominee, well before, Kamala, that notwithstanding what's going on here with with Trump and the propaganda, that because 75% of American people support abortion, 75%, that is the way I believed, and I still believe to a lesser extent, but I believe that we as Democrats can win back the White House. We can win this election. So it's obviously reproductive rights, right to abortion. It's the Equal Rights Amendment. Okay, I do not think we will ever, no matter what, we have an Equal Protection Clause, the 14th Amendment, and the Constitution. People argue, well, there are other ways to prove, women's equality, full equality, but it's not true. We need to have a constitutional right in our Constitution, making women equal citizens. And that's why you guys should, fight for the ERA. And there's still national efforts and local efforts going on about that. I think that national daycare family leave, I mean, really, in this society of America and the world, the fact that we don't have that, I mean, is insanity. And I think you guys who may be emerging into families or whatever, it affects us all. If you're taking care of your grandparents, if you have kids, whatever, disabled, partners, etc. We need to have that. And then that's the most human thing that one could want and need in a country. Equal pay, obviously equal pay. And then climate, the issue of climate, that is the gun issue, but climate change, climate impacts the lives of women at the most basic levels all the way up throughout the world, the global north, global south, because women are the caretakers, most countries in the world. And if they can't access water, if they can't access proper energy, if they can't get access to planting trees to be farmers, in the case of Africa, women can't assert their rightful power. So that's how climate impacts right there. And the bottom line is, until, and I really believe this, until we restore, abortion rights and get the Equal Rights Amendment and the National Daycare Bill, family leave, that's what it'll be. We'll have a chance, a shot for really trying to be leveling the playing field as much as we deserve it at this point in our history.
Okay, thank you.
We're loading everybody up with a lot of stuff, right? And I think
Absolutely.
it could be a little overwhelming, but nevertheless.
No, I think this is an excellent conversation. I'm not sure, let me just see here, if there are any other questions. Let me just take a quick gander before we, okay, do we have anything else here?
Does anybody want to make a statement about what they feel? I mean, we have 2 minutes, right? Their own statement. The smart group of young women out there on this call, I know. I mean, maybe someone wants to say something, make a statement.
Yeah.
Nope.
No, I don't think so. I don't see anyone here, Liz.
Okay. Okay.
Good, okay, let's see.
I think there's one more question.
Oh, there is, yes. Let's see, what is it? Why is abortion framed only as a women's issue when men are so much a part of it at the inception, and more important, when there is a child?
I mean, look, I know we're about to be at time, but it's a great question. It's one that's super frustrating. It's not just a women's issue, right? I think that in general, women tend to just get things done. And this is like really about women's bodies and bodily autonomy. But I think that it's been an everyone issue. And I think that the last couple of years has made that clear.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, all right. Yeah, go ahead, Lala.
No, and I just wanted to say thank you to the person who's making that documentary series, Stand Up and Speak Out. The personal politics of women's rights sounds very interesting, and we'll definitely check it out. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, very much so. Thank you.
I also want to share, thank you, Marissa, but also Mary,
Right.
Brett, for pulling this all together as competently and as efficiently as she has. And it's not always easy. So thank you for that. I want to thank you both all for that.
Right.
Yes.
Liz, you are so on point. Oh, Lala, I'm sorry.
I just want to echo everything that Liz said.
Okay. All right. Well, okay, we are at time. I will echo again what Liz and Lala said, which is thank you to Mary Brennan. Also, thank you to Victoria St. James for helping us with this tonight. We wouldn't be here without both of them. I also want to thank very much Lala and Liz for this wonderful conversation and their valuable insights on this topic. Thank you so much. Thank you for being our kickoff event for Project Continuum. And finally, but not least, thank you to all who attended. We couldn't do this without you. And we look forward to seeing you at our next event. So have a good evening and be well. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.